Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 11, Episode 123. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Glad you guys are back with us for this Tuesday episode of the Terrible Podcast. And Dave, nothing official yet, but we anticipate exactly 1 month from today, the Pittsburgh Steelers will have day one, practice one of their 2021 training camp.
Yeah, exciting time. Now we just got to find out where it's going to be at, and hopefully it's going to be, back out at Latrobe. And obviously, as of Mike Tomlin talking late last week to wrap up the mandatory minicamp, he thought he'd know by now. Just keep your fingers crossed and wait. That's really all we can do at this point, and certainly do hope they're able to return to Latrobe.
Yeah, absolutely. We should find out by the end of the month, I would think, but we'll just wait and see and pass that news along to you whenever we receive it. So we are kind of in that official dead period of the offseason, very small window of that this year with mandatory minicamps wrapping up this past week. But on Friday evening, I would say, long after we wrapped up the show in the morning, Dave, got some news that came across that was certainly a surprise to me and probably a surprise to most Steelers fans. ESPN's Adam Schefter reporting that five-time Pro Bowl guard Trai Turner had visited the Pittsburgh Steelers on Friday. Obviously has not signed yet, so we can assume he left without a contract, and the odds of him signing and circling back to the Steelers are pretty low, but interesting to see Turner's name because just generally speaking, you don't have five-time Pro Bowlers visiting the Steelers in June.
Yeah, I think globally, because of who he is, was maybe more of a surprise. More so than maybe the position he plays. I think if you really take a look at this, and that's really something I think we talked about the other day too, right? The offensive line depth and how that's a concern. And you look at the guard position specifically, David DeCastro and Kevin Dotson obviously expected to be your starters, but who are behind those guys right now? And obviously B.J. Finney in the mix and J.C. Hassenauer and, who else, from that point forward there. Leave it to Kevin Cole. I view this as this is another guy that's got a little bit of pedigree to him out on the street that remains unsigned. Let's kick the tires on him and see where he's at right now. And, if he'll sign one of those veteran benefit contracts that we have leaving that we always leave on the front door, good for us. Now, obviously, I think there was a lot of freaking out there going on. Well, what does this mean about David DeCastro? Is he injured? Is he thinking about retiring? And that has created really unsubstantiated rumors, I guess, more than anything. I mean, obviously it's a concern that David DeCastro not doing anything this offseason, but he was reportedly, at least I think one day at mandatory minicamp. Right. And, Mike, I believe Mike Tomlin when he said, look, if it was anything serious injury related, he would let on about it. It could be a myriad of issues. I would be surprised if it's anything maybe retirement related. And this comes from me, the initial guy that wrote way earlier, right after the 2020 season ended, kind of wondering about maybe where David DeCastro's head might be at. Now, obviously, since then, the team has lost Alejandro Villanueva, DeCastro's really best friend. On that offensive line to free agency. Marquise Pouncey obviously retired. You have DeCastro's relationship with Colts quarterback.
Andrew Luck.
Yeah, Andrew Luck, and those two are real close. And Andrew Luck out of the blue, called it an NFL career not too terribly long ago. And DeCastro's obviously got a new little one in the house, but I think unless it's like a new injury or something with David DeCastro that has him rethinking things right now, I think DeCastro would have made the decision earlier in the offseason to retire if indeed that would have been the case. Not saying that can't obviously be the case because, something may have happened and have him rethinking things. But at this point, I just think as a paused kind of objective look around and common sense aspect of it, I would be surprised if this is about retirement with David DeCastro. I would more lean to maybe something. I think Dr. Mel did a great job on her terrible take on Sunday of walking through the situation with DeCastro. Maybe he had some sort of procedure done, maybe he had something in his knee that needed to be cleaned up or something along those lines that came about. Until I have more reason to believe otherwise, I think it's just going to be mere speculation that people are going to run with out there.
Sure. Yeah, let me tell you the two things I don't think this is about specifically when it comes to David DeCastro. I don't think it's a retirement issue for the reasons you mentioned, and if he was contemplating it, he probably wouldn't be at mandatory minicamp even if he wasn't practicing. And I don't think it's some sort of new serious injury that's expected to keep him out for, 4 to 5 months or something like that. But I do wonder because the last 12 months for David DeCastro have been probably the worst 12 months of his career, aside from the start of his career when he missed time his rookie season with injury, just with his core muscle injury. He played through last year, missed the start of the last season, had his worst year, I think, in 2020. Talked about, COVID and just the mental strain and problems that came along with that. And obviously he's still not practicing now for whatever reason. So is there maybe an insurance policy of, okay, there's a really good player like Trai Turner who's shown some really good tape when he's been healthy, but health has been a big issue with Trai Turner as well. You have to play a full season since 2016, but is there a chance to get a good depth guy like that? Because it is a chance to get a good depth guy like that, but also because we maybe don't exactly know where DeCastro's going to go, and do you think he's going to play all 17 games in 2021? That may be a bit of an open question right now.
Yeah, I think you have to look at each individual guy that the Steelers bring in, especially this time of year, as being in the vacuum all in and of itself. Kevin Colbert's never been shy about adding guys after rookie camp or after, let's say even mandatory mini camp. And I had that study not too long ago that I wrote about, and how really we expect 2 to 3 guys to be signed maybe during the remainder of the offseason that end up making the 53-man roster. And once again, I think it goes back to making sure the bottom of your roster is as good as it possibly can be. And that means going back and looking at the guard position again. And heck, Finney, as good as Finney has played during his career at guard specifically, when asked to do so, this is a guy that, a former undrafted free agent and didn't play last season and obviously had his issues last season. Then you have a guy like J.C. Hassenauer who, oh, Lord have mercy if we have to look forward to him playing any meaningful snaps in 2021. And, who else do you have there? Avante Collins, and then obviously Rashad Coward, who converted defensive lineman, who, obviously has logged, 600 or something snaps or so, I think, in the NFL, but he's still a developmental player. So if there is a guy out there such as a Trai Turner that you think you might be able to have on the cheap, regardless of what's going on with DeCastro, why wouldn't you bring a guy like that in?
Right. No, I agree with that. I think there's layers to this for sure, as there often are with these decisions and things like that. When you have a chance to get five-time Pro Bowler on the cheap potentially like that, those guys don't come along too often. Now, there's good reason of why Turner's still available. Like I said, he's had knee issues and groin issues and several concussions, and there's some big medical red flags there. You could not trust Trai Turner, in my opinion, to play a full 17-game season at this point in his career. But if he can come in as a backup, potentially really cheap option, then that's maybe a chance to really capitalize and get maybe a steal if he's a backup and has to start a couple games or whatever the case is. So I think that's maybe the number one reason for this move. But I think there are a couple layers to it. But to the here and now, he's yet to sign, and he's probably in no major hurry to sign either. And so I imagine Pittsburgh was not offering him much money. So the odds of him becoming a Steeler are pretty low right now.
Right. Now, I also think if they thought there was a level of urgency here when it came to a guy like DeCastro in 2021, Uh, and if he look, you if DeCastro ends up retiring or whatever, you're going to save quite a bit of salary cap money when it comes to a guy like that. If you deem Turner as being that guy, you'd probably offer him a little bit more than the minimum as well too. In
Yeah,
other
that's
words,
true.
I think the urgency to get someone in there would be there if indeed there was more to this smoke coming from the David, more to maybe a potential fire coming from the smoke let off by one David DeCastro
Right.
not doing much of anything this offseason. So, look, nobody knows for sure. It's all speculation out there right now. Once again, my best guess is that there's had some sort of procedure done,
Mhm.
and then aside of that, just Kevin Colbert doing his due diligence, what he does every time during the offseason. And
Right.
I think too, when you look at guys like Malik Hooker and Trai Turner, now that mandatory mini camps are over with, there's nothing really you can show anything other than taking a physical and all like that. Uh, I think now's the time those guys, especially if they're facing minimal contracts that'll probably always be out there waiting for them in different cities. What's the hurry?
Yeah, I guess the only upside would be just, the comfort of signing with a team, some stability with making a move and things like that, and picking up the playbook and just being ready for training camp as opposed to maybe being a little behind if you sign really late in the process. But and to the player himself, you watch probably more Trai Turner than I have, and according to your tweets, you were not impressed with the job Turner did last season.
Right. Just I think you go back and think about Trai Turner during his career. Very aggressive, physical type player. I didn't see that. I mean, really, his tapes littered with a lot of blown blocks and things of that nature there. Now, I believe he injured his groin right around week 2 of the season last year, and then missed a huge chunk of time. Now, you obviously had COVID going on and restrictions involved with that last season. Not, nobody. I definitely don't know what kind of rehab he went through and what he was able to do and didn't do. Maybe he wasn't able to rehab the way he wanted to get himself back in tip-top shape, and more than anything, just wanted that groin to cool down a little bit. And in other words, was there's a good chance just because of restrictions and not being able to maybe train properly when he did return to action, he wasn't where he wanted to be physically, but and maybe that played into his play. Very well could have been
Sure.
all those circumstances out there. That said, Father Time's undefeated, and guys get old. I mean, you just look. I mean, David DeCastro for whatever reason, and we think it might have been somewhat health related. Obviously didn't have a great season last year for his Steelers, so there's reason to be concerned about his age. And Trai Turner's not too many years behind him there. So you know just like training camp, we'll have to wait and see what the word is here. But nobody, I don't think, has led on as far as like other Steelers offensive linemen, and even Zach Banner was on the radio this morning, and I didn't get a sense that and obviously he wasn't asked specifically about DeCastro, but I never got a sense that he feels that they'll be without David DeCastro.
Right. Yeah. Again, I don't think it's as serious of an issue as some people are speculating about retirement or stuff like that. I mean, who knows? We'll see. I don't know what's in DeCastro's heart and head right now, but I don't think that's terribly likely. And with Turner, as you said, his play wasn't good last year, partially injury related, but he's had injuries for the last 4 or 5 seasons. And Carolina traded him in the Okung deal to the Chargers, and the Chargers tried to trade him. They didn't find any buyers, so they released him. So the last 2 teams he's played for, the only 2 teams he's played for, have tried to trade him and eventually moved him in one way or another, and that's not a good sign for a guy with his resume, at least.
Right, and boy, you want to talk about an offensive line that's already got a lot of questions about it, and you kind of you kind of speculated that, okay, well, they'll get the real David DeCastro back, or at least a better version of David DeCastro back this year. And really, that's one of the things that you kind of hang your hat on, so to speak, when it came to this offensive line. The potential of it as far as optimism goes in 2021 is David DeCastro. So, boy, if you don't wind up having him, and you got a guy with even more question marks, associated with him in Trai Turner, man, I mean, you're talking about how many, a core four in a new position, Dotson, who didn't play all that much during his rookie season, and especially although he did play, quite a bit, I guess, or enough at left guard and has worked at that position throughout the offseason. You got a rookie in Kendrick Green who, 4.5 games, I guess, at Illinois at center, and a rookie on top of that. If you have Turner in there, a new guy who missed all the offseason practices with you, who has injury concerns, and then you have Zach Banner at right tackle coming back from, a serious knee injury. So, you just hope beyond hope that, DeCastro can be kind of who you think or hope he might be able to be, return to the player to kind of give at least some fluidity, I guess, to the changes on that offensive line.
Right. Or just one guy you don't have to worry about, because as you said, there are so many concerns about what the rest of the group. If DeCastro can go back to his pre-2020 self, then that's one less thing to worry about as you work on a otherwise young and growing and changing offensive line.
And look, I mean, David DeCastro did, obviously what happened, you could tell that he wasn't all that happy last year with, the pressures of COVID and just dealing with the way the season went and probably his health. And that's one, just kind of, the way, the relationship he had with Villanueva. There were several reasons maybe to think earlier in the season that there, last year of his contract coming up, and has already got probably quite a bit of money in the bank and all like that. There was reason to think, I think, earlier in the offseason that maybe he would consider retirement. But once again, I think as long as this isn't a new serious injury or him just all of a sudden having a revelation and waking up one morning, I would be surprised if this is anything retirement related. But it's not to say that things like that don't happen, I guess.
Right. I mean, Luck retired 2 weeks before the season started. Whenever he retired. But again, I don't think that's the issue. And while I wish he would have been able to practice in minicamp and been there in full capacity, it's not necessarily a giant red flag that he wasn't, because maybe he's still recovering from something. It's not like he absolutely needs those reps. He's older. Let young guys and developing guys and new guys to this team get work in, and just make sure DeCastro is ready and 100% for training camp. So it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world that he didn't practice it during those 3 days.
Right. So now, I mean, I don't know how much more people want us to speculate on that. I think some people are treating him as possibly retiring as a legitimate rumor right now, but I haven't seen anything that would lead us to believe that that's anything more than just speculation out there.
Yeah, it's just off-season fodder right now. And so is Trai Turner becoming a Steeler, because so far he's yet to be a Steeler. Could that change? Possibly. But until he signs, and if he signs, I think I'm done talking about Trai Turner. Yep. Let's talk about Kendrick Green. Dave, you have some news. The lone unsigned Steelers draft pick. I use some information article going up on Steelers Depot that kind of explains why he's the last Steelers rookie to sign his rookie contract.
Yeah, you look around and I got to be honest with you, I'm a bit surprised Kendrick Green remains unsigned at this point. But reached out to Joel Corry, friend of the show, former NFL agent who writes for CBS Sports, and wanted his take on the matter. And asked him point blank, do you think this is offset language? Do you think this is percentage guarantee amount and all like that? In other words, why does Joel Corry think that maybe a guy like Kendrick Green, third round draft pick, remains unsigned at this point? Joel Corry told me trying to get the max amount of money for the slot. He says Nico Collins Collins, who was drafted 2 picks later, received 100% of his draft slot. So far, every third-round pick signed has gotten 100%. Only the first 8 picks in the third round last year were at 100%. The 24th pick last year in the third round got 97.94%. So this is all posturing and getting what you can get right now in all aspects of it. Getting percent of 100% of the slotted amount. I'm sure there's some language issues in there, maybe as far as some offsets go. I did some research after I reached out to Joel Corry. Look, you tend to get hyper focused on your guys only, right? You look around the league and you say, oh man, all these guys are signed. Kendrick Green's got to be the only, one of only, 4 or 5 guys out there unsigned. Well, I did a little bit of research and come to find out from the 77th, at least from, I have not double or triple check this. So this is just a quick run through. Starting at pick 77th overall, which would have been, let's see, the 13th pick, I think, in the third round. Josh Palmer, wide receiver for the Los Angeles Chargers, is unsigned, and starting from that spot, 77th overall, 13th overall in the third round, for the rest of the third round picks that were made, and that includes the compensatory picks as well too. Only one player of that group of, I don't know, what is it, 30, almost 28 or so picks. Only one player is signed from that group as far as I can tell, and that is Nico Collins at 89th overall, who was picked 2 picks after Green, as Joel Corry stated there. So I guess in short, there's no reason to be concerned here. It's going to take Kendrick Green probably getting boxed in a little bit, for things to go down here. So it might end up being a while longer before he is signed. I mean, even the guy picked after him, Trai Turner, I believe, is the running back for the San Francisco 49ers, remains unsigned, obviously, as well, too. So maybe if Trai Turner gets signed, and I would look for a couple picks ahead of Kendrick Green, Amari Rodgers, getting boxed in a little bit, and that that thing with Green shouldn't move along here. With all that, I was pretty confident he'd be signed by now, and he's not. And we are 4 weeks away from the start of training camps. This might go on a couple more weeks. So if you're following this at home, I would look at a couple of guys, like I said, above Kendrick Green, guys like Amari Rodgers, Wyatt Davis, the guard with the Vikings, and maybe a guy like Trai Turner. Once those dominoes start falling, will obviously, I think, get us closer to a guy like Kendrick Green signing.
Yeah, but bottom line is he will still get signed before training camp. Maybe the only complication to that would be that the Steelers report before other teams do. So maybe Green will have to be the first domino to fall, potentially, but it'll get done and it'll get figured out there at some point.
Yeah, I was surprised at that list. Once again, you get hyper-focused on your own guys, and you almost daily you see this guy signed, that guy signed. It was a little bit sobering to see such a long list of unsigned third-round draft picks there.
Yeah, but it'll happen. He'll get under contract and join the rest of his teammates. Speaking of offensive linemen, that'll be the theme of today's show. Zach Banner, as you mentioned earlier, joined the Fan Morning Show on Tuesday and talked about Adrian Klemm and Matt Canada and expectations for 2021. What did Banner have to say about playing for new offensive line coach Adrian Klemm, Dave?
I don't think we learned anything new. Just kind of a recap and more of Banner commenting on that, that philosophy. I mean, what are the words that we have heard so far this offseason when it comes to this Steelers offensive line and the type of play that we should expect under new offensive line coach Adrian Klemm? Aggressive, violent, nasty, physical, attack. Basically, that's my wife on a Saturday morning. You know,
and Sunday morning.
And Sunday morning. All those words should obviously sound familiar to everybody who follows this team closely throughout this offseason here, especially when it comes to the Steelers offensive line. And Banner was on 93.7 The Fan this morning and asked about those aforementioned attributes and all that we've heard about the offensive line and really how he expects them to manifest themselves this season under Klemm. And he went back to, and I don't think this is the first time he's kind of referenced this, saying that Klemm is a West Coast kid just like Banner is, and inner city from California, and he threw out the analogy, just grew up different, learned a lot of different things, talked about youth football in that area and how sports are played, and how if you ever go watch an inner city football game or youth football game, that the mechanics are off, that there's really not too much technique, but there is athletic ability, a lot of heart, and referenced the compared the Steelers offensive line group to that. He says, the youth that we have, the pups that we just brought in, the vets that we have. Who's the other vet on the roster, Alex?
It's DeCastro. It's DeCastro.
Right. I mean that going back to that DeCastro conversation, and talking about Banner not really saying anything, but him saying the vets that we have. I mean, there are not many in that room other than DeCastro and himself. The guys that we have, I mean, they just adopted that mentality from Klemm. So, is this probably going to be the most technically sound group of technicians on the Steelers offensive line in 2021? Probably not, at least probably not initially. But let me tell you, Banner and really to hear the rest of them, they're going to be a lot of heart in this group, and they're going to be people being attempted to be thrown out of some clubs, if you will. I think he said we're going to get better every day. We're going to give a damn about it. We're going to put a lot of heart into it. And just not so worried, not worried about accolades, but getting the guys that the offensive skill position players around them that are expected to get the stats, making sure they get the stats. So
right.
That's one of the takeaways. He says, so how do we do that, and how do we do that as violent as possible without getting a 15-yard penalty or a $20,000 fine in your locker? So going to habitual line steppers, if you will. Look, I don't know how you can't be kind of, at least because of all the question marks about this offensive line and how it's made up, and you go back and you think about the tape that we've watched on Kendrick Green and the physical style of play that he had at Illinois, and look, Banner's no cupcake, and assuming DeCastro plays, he's a very physical guy. We all know some of that tape that Kevin Dotson laid down at Louisiana Lafayette really got you excited. I wouldn't expect this group to be pushed around, I'll tell you that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all good to hear. Not that it's anything new that we're hearing, but still good nonetheless. I think just a physical, aggressive, tenacious unit is kind of the foundation of any good offensive line. But the big question will be, can they build off of that and be more than just a bunch of junkyard dogs? Someone that can play with that controlled anger and aggression that still has technique but has the physicality and ability to finish. You combine both those things, then you really have something as a starting five. So that'll be the big question. So they definitely have to instill and get back to the roots of O-line play. But they're going to have to be a lot more than those roots to be a really competitive and strong unit and for this offense.
Right. I mean, look, time will obviously tell, and it's one of the big question marks about this offense right now. I mean, they've got an experienced group of wide receivers. Obviously, have a veteran quarterback in Ben Roethlisberger. We all think, or like to think, that we know what the team is getting in one Najee Harris and how he's going to be a bell cow, and the amount of touches and how and to what degree he'll be used and all like that. I think you keep going back to, can the offensive line hold up their part? And that's one of the big, I think, question marks offensively this team has, and with good reason going into this season.
Right, and while Clem is rebuilding and working on the offensive line, Matt Canada is leading the offense as a whole, and Zach Banner also talked about what he's seeing different from Matt Canada and the Steelers' 2021 offense, telling the show, quote, fans who have been fans for years are going to notice some of the differences that we're doing. It's out there, a lot of different motions, a lot of different formations, a lot of different things, a lot of different ways we run the ball, a lot of different schemes. So the motions we knew about, some of the schemes, interesting. The banner kind of talks about that. You're going to see more zone stuff, potentially some outside zone. We'll certainly be monitoring and watching for that kind of stuff. But, Banner says that there are clear differences that the hardcore fan will be able to notice.
Right. So, another thing to look forward to. Obviously, we don't expect a lot of Ben Roethlisberger rolling out, but I would think we're going to see more than nothing is something when it comes to like Ben under center and more play action and those kind of things there, and we'll see just how much vertical versus horizontal offense there is, how they go about implementing that motion, maybe more outside of the scripted, outside of the scripted portion early in games there, and how they utilize those tight ends. We're going to see more two and three tight ends the way kind of Eric Ebron maybe led on might be the case here. They're going to have to, it goes back to what we said. They're going to have to run the football a lot more, more effectively, have a higher success rate there. I think it really, really starts there because once again, I don't think you can run this offense, catch short, run long, and have Ben Roethlisberger do that 40 to 50 times a game.
Yeah, well, that's what happened last year, and we saw the results of that.
Right. Now, on the flip side, I saw, Warren Sharp. I respect a lot of, and I buy a lot of Warren Sharp products throughout the year. I think he does a good job overall there. But boy, he has become Mr. Hot Take on Twitter with very raw stats that don't have a lot of that aren't contextualized very well, and him and the predictability just based only on under center runs versus shotgun passes. I mean, if you know anything about the Steelers, I mean, none of that's overly surprising. And to kind of label that, I mean, look, if you broke this down maybe more specifically into 2-minute stuff and behind in games and just abandoning the running game because it being so awful early in the games, I just would have expected a guy like him to kind of contextualize that a little bit better, than just having an average amount and playing the totality game. Well, they were above average, so that makes them predictable, aspect of it. What'd you think about that tweet?
I'm not a big Warren Sharp fan. I mean, he's built a good business. He's got good stats, but yeah, he's gotten a little takey and combines it with memes and just kind of cringe at some of the stuff. But here's what he said if you didn't see the actual tweet. He says, the Randy Fichtner effect. When the Steelers were under center, they ran the ball 85% of the time. The NFL average is 68%. When they were in shotgun, they passed the ball 76% of the time. Average is 72%. They were the number one most predictable offense in the NFL based solely on where the quarterback stood pre-snap. I think at a baseline level, you can understand some of that. But, I mean, to the point about shotgun, I mean, they were 76%. The average is 72%. That's not that much of a difference. It's about the average. And then in terms of being under center, it's a much higher percentage, 85 versus the NFL average of 68. But the Steelers were barely under center.
Right.
And so when they were, it was as you said, closing at the game, forming an offense, obvious run situations where you could kind of predict that regardless of whether you were shotgun or under center. So the sample size there is pretty small. So I think you're right. There's a lot of context that needs to be added to that tweet that was clearly not. And so I think there's a lot better criticisms of the Fichtner predictability than those numbers alone.
I mean, there's a narrative bias in there that is easy to run with just based on those stats alone. Once again, I mean, I don't hate the guy. I think he does great work. You dig into deeper some of the stuff that he sells, in the preseason guide and all like that and all. But just the raw that kind of stuff needs to be contextualized more. Basically, is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
it came off very hot takey, and that's one thing I've noticed about him over the course of the last I guess, year. I don't remember him being like that. Twitter hot takey to that degree. I kind of thought one of the things about him is he does dive deeper into that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah, and there's sometimes good information that he in his business offers, but that one not my favorite stat. And it's not like I'm some giant fan of Fichtner and thought he was unpredictable. He wasn't, but is that the stat you want to use to illustrate that? That's not the best way to go about
Right.
that.
It's not the hill to plant the narrative on, I don't think.
Yeah. Be like, they were in shotgun. They passed 76% of the time. That's 4% higher than average. Predictable. It's like, well, it doesn't sound as impressive as you're trying to make it out to be. But
Right.
anyway, speaking of the Steelers offense, Dave, you're doing a study on Ben's deep ball and some of the incompletions. You've looked at completions in the past, and you're kind of working your way through the years backwards, starting with, I think, 2016. That article went up, I believe, over the weekend on Steelers Depot. What did you learn about Ben's deep ball incompletions?
Yeah, Sammy Coates couldn't catch it.
I tried to forget about that. You brought it back into my memory.
Man, you go back through and you watch a lot of this stuff. I don't want to take one season and draw hardcore results. The whole idea of doing it this way is because it's next to damn near impossible to make a post out of 5 years worth of deep pass incompletions. I think it's better to eat the elephant 1 year at a time and then throw all those things together and then point to kind of what you found out from there. A little bit more under center, more than what he does now. Obviously, back then, not to a high degree. Obviously, he was in a shotgun a lot on these deep incompleted throws. Ben's always liked throwing outside the numbers, deep against kind of pre-snap reads, right? See the man coverage on the outside, and basically, whether it's an audible or a sight read or something like that, Ben is known just flat out. I don't want to say predetermined, but really predetermined based on looks and what he reads, that he's going to get the football, and if he sees what he wants to see with a guy on the outside, he's going to throw the ball deep and then basically hopefully become a 50-50 proposition there. And he's done that for years, right? I mean,
right. And to be fair, he's never had a ton of weapons to work with over the middle of the field in the sense of those vertical seam threats.
Right. I mean, and an occasional Eli Rogers in there. I think the thing that sticks out is most of these targets incompleted air, 20 or more air yards included either Antonio Brown or Sammy Coates. And let me tell you, you don't know who ran the route right or who. I mean, there are certain instances that go down as an overthrow where you wonder if the route could have been ran a little bit more earnestly and been throwing to the spot and expecting the guy to be there. Those kind of things. So just labeling overthrow without showing a visual of it. There's a level of subjectiveness, obviously, in that kind of stuff there. Sammy let a couple. There were quite a few balls that either Sammy Coates dropped. Man, that one against Baltimore that brought back a bad memory there in the end zone in a game back in 2016. I mean, Ben put that on the money right there and went right off Sammy Coates' hands there. That was not uncommon for a guy like Coates. Now, there were quite a few pass breakups. I think one of the things that stuck out is he had a handful of interceptions. How many interceptions did he have in total of that group? He had 1, 2, and I think there were like 3 or 4 more that probably should have been intercepted that were dropped or what have you. In going back through that group of plays outside of the drops and outside of really basically seeing vintage Ben of just trying to attack on the outside, nothing really stuck out overall. There wasn't a lot of extended to play type situations. I came across in there. Overall, there was a little bit more play action than what we've seen. Those kind of things there, but I guess all in all, from nothing nothing stuck out as far as 2016 bin difference versus 2020 bin difference.
Okay. So more research will be needed on this with the future years coming up to maybe get a better read on the situation.
Right. Now, I mean, you're going to change completion percent. When you talk about how many incompleted passes were there? 58, I think, in deep balls in 2016. I mean, you add a couple of those drops in there as possible receptions. That can with that sample size, that can change a completion percentage, man.
How much would it have had those catches by Coates happened? Do you have the numbers on that?
Well, I mean, you have to go back and look at the total number of balls that he actually threw or whatnot. In total, I only did just as far as this part of the research doing the incompleted throws. Okay. So, I mean, I that's the kind of stuff I'm looking to get to, I guess, so to speak. But I mean, Coates had, what do I have down here? Coates and Brown totaled, 39 of the 58 incompleted deep passes. That's quite a bit there. And Coates had 5 of them. Let the record show that 5 of them were drops, with 3 of those coming in the AFC Championship game against the New England Patriots. Wide receiver Sammy Coates was responsible for 4 of those 5 drops there. So, look, I mean, that was a game that the Steelers got behind in, and I mean, you had the likes of Kobe Hamilton and Sammy Coates as your receivers on the field, and you didn't have Le'Veon Bell for most of that game on top of it there. So, once again, you see some of these ugly drops in there with Coates, and overall, there's nothing that stuck out, I guess, is what the main takeaway right now. There's nothing that made me say, oh, well, look how Ben was there versus how Ben is now.
Gotcha. Another study you're doing, Dave, is going through some of the dropped interceptions of the Pittsburgh Steelers secondary last season. The first article came out yesterday about Joe Hayden's drop against the Houston Texans in, I believe that was week 2 or week 3. Any themes there that you're either trying to look for or have found so far in your study?
Overall, this stems from what Joe Hayden said when he talked to the media last week, and how they got to do a better job of obviously upping the takeaways that the secondary gets in 2021, and how they don't need to. There were several that they had last season that they should have had that they put on the ground. That just got me thinking of how many of those interceptions or should have been interceptions might have potentially changed, the landscape of the game. What would have happened had this player not dropped this interception? I'm not just doing this just with defensive backs. I'm going to do it all in totality. And I think there's, I forget what it is, 10 or 12 of these dropped should have been interceptions there. I'm going back through and I'm breaking down each one of the would have or should have been interceptions, and then looking at it as what kind of impact maybe it had on the game. And when it came specifically to the Hayden should have been interception, it was later in the fourth quarter. The Steelers had a 7-point lead there. I think there was 5-something left there. It was a 2nd and 20-something play there. Nice coverage, really. Kind of a read, potential trap coverage there. If the read's there, kind of a cover 2 man, if you will, type situation there. Watson let probably one of Watson's worst throws of that game, threw way behind Brandon Cooks in that situation, and it was so far behind. I think Hayden got surprised by it, that it went to him, and it essentially bounced off of Hayden's helmet there. Potential impact of that. You never know how things are going to go, right? But him not, had he gotten that, the Steelers would have had the football obviously within field goal distance at that point with 5-something left in the game. You would think that at worst case scenario, maybe they get a field goal out of that. They take a 10-point lead and pretty much essentially put the game away. Instead, it became a 3rd and 21. The next play, I think, was a false start. Sets up a 3rd and 26. They completed a pass to Kenny Stills, well short of the first down. They ended up having to punt. The Steelers got the ball back and ran out the rest of the clock in the game. So it wasn't. In my eyes, it wasn't. Oh my God! It changed the complexion of the game, and probably most of these aren't going to. Mm-hmm. If you live in the hypothetical world of how this might have impacted. But there might be 1 or 2 of them that you look back and say, man, I wonder had X player gotten this interception, maybe that turns a loss in, maybe that plays a big part in turning, a loss, especially later in the season, into a win. Right. So just going through those just out of a lot of the, people say, man, how do you guys come up with some of this content or whatnot, especially this time of the off season? It really stems from trying to answer our own questions, I think. At least to me, it's something to be brought up, or a player will be brought up, and it'll pose a question in my head, and out of my own curiosity, I want to find out. So as part of that, I document it and present it as a post, and that's the secret of how we come up with some of our content during the offseason.
Yeah, so I'm 100% the same way, and at least the dropped interceptions to me weren't as bad as they were. Would that have been 2018? I guess it would have been when they just dropped 14 of them and barely picked off anything. So obviously you've seen improvement there. You've seen a more ball-hogging secondary, and that will have to continue despite the losses of guys like Mike Hilton and Steven Nelson, and some of those young guys will have to step up. And whoever can show the ability to take the football away and make those splash plays will be the guys that get the significant playing time.
Right.
All right, Dave, anything else here to talk about? Again, quieter show today. I don't usually like to get in the whole media type stuff, but since we were talking about Warren Sharp earlier, Matt Miller has ranked Kevin Colbert the number 1 GM in football, which is good to hear, I guess. But interesting explanation says that Colbert's worst move in his career has been drafting Terrell Edmunds. He says his first year on the job, Colbert's was 2016, which is just not true. Says that Colbert's never had to hire a head coach before, which is also not true. Just a very weird take on Kevin Colbert from Matt Miller.
If people have listened to this show long enough,
right,
they know my thoughts on Matt Miller. A guy that's over his head. I mean, a guy that just I think from just pure exposure, especially over the years and being on Bleacher Report and all like that has somehow morphed into this guy with, I guess, credibility in some people's eyes, and the fact that he's landed with ESPN is just mind-numbing. I think he's one of the worst people out there in the major media side right now. That should be. You shouldn't even read anything he writes, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't know how to be. I'm not. I'm me, I'm blunt when it comes to this kind of stuff, and I think his takes for the most part are absolutely worthless. I mean, does he remember Artie Burns or what?
Right. I think he at one point he recognizes the Colbert started in 2000, but another point says he started in 2016. So I think he thinks the Colbert began his NFL Steelers career in 2016. But I don't know. Very, very weird there. Let's see what else is going on here with the site. Have you finished reading, or have you read it all? Bill Cowher's new book, Heart and Steel, Dave?
No, I just started scratching the surface in it and all. I've been busy with medical issues, unfortunately, and things around the house that need to be taken care of this time of the off season here. So as the and I'm not I'm not good about sitting down and reading large chunks at a time. So normally I pick through it, and it takes me longer than most to get some of these books read.
Yeah, no, I've been doing about a chapter a night.
What are some of your main takeaways so far?
Cowher, I think, was very honest when he said about how honest he was going to be in this book, about how transparent he was and some of the stories that he told and things like that. And we've written a lot about that on Steelers Depot already, and some of the stuff that's been notable about, just his upbringing and his time with the Steelers and things like that. There's also a really good story about, and I haven't written about this yet, Cowher wanted to re-sign Merrill Hodge and really wanted to sign him. They were close on contract terms, but they weren't 100% there. And I'm paraphrasing the story off the top of my head right now, but he goes into Rooney's office and Dan Rooney's office and says, I really want to sign Merrill Hodge. Can we get the extra money to do that? And Rooney looks at him, and Cowher, of course, talks up Rooney in the whole book and the family and how important they were and all that. But Rooney looks at him and says, you don't mess with my money. I'm going to be the one that decides how we spend the money. And that was the end of the conversation. That's why Merrill Hodge ended up going to the Bears, and they signed John L. Williams to replace him instead. So some really cool stories there that I've never heard of before that are shared in Cowher's book.
For those that missed the YouTube live stream Monday night, you talked a little bit about Jeff Hardings as well too. Why don't you retell that real quick?
Yeah, in Cowher's book, and because we had talked about Kendrick Green making the move from guard to center. Granted, he played a little bit of center at Illinois, but primarily a guard. And you'd mentioned about how Dirk Dawson, coming out of Kentucky, was a guard who made the move to center. Apparently, the same case for Jeff Hardings, according to Cowher's book. And I had forgotten about this, that Hardings was a right guard only in Detroit, and they converted him to center when the Steelers signed Hardings to replace, I believe it was Dirk Dawson. And so they had to make that transition, but Hardings had some issues early, but figured things out. So again, does that mean Green's going to have success? No, not necessarily, but interesting, comparison there that I had never realized before.
Yeah, and for some reason in my mind, my recollection was that he had played a little bit of some center at when he was with the Lions, talking about Hardings. But I went back and I was so curious about that late last night that I jumped on. By the way, people don't have a subscription to newspapers.com. I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. I mean, you jump back in the time machine and you can find especially stuff pre, I don't know, 2000 just in general, or even really pre, I don't know, 2004 or 5, right around in there. Just a great, it was like having a library. You're not old enough to remember the old microfiche or whatnot that you used to have to go to the library and pull out those reels and do reports on and research on that way there. But just absolutely fantastic research tool, well worth the subscription. I probably use that at least, and I'm not just football stuff, obviously, man. I mean, I just recently went back and doing some reading on the Leonard Skinner plane crash and all like that, and looking back at old newspaper articles and just little things like that, But for some reason, I had recollection that Hardings played a little bit of center with Lions, but I found a couple articles from that time period and said no, he was specifically guard only, and in fact he was looking forward to re-signing with the Lions, but they had the change in morning wig, and just once the regimes changed there, he said the heck with it, I'm going to make the jump there. But there was quite a few articles I think that referenced that he was guard only with the Lions there. And the reason we kind of talk about that, as you stated there, is not so much that this guarantees success. It's just that the Steelers organization has had in their past not being shy about taking guys that have virtually not played the center position before, and right, been guards and moved them over to the center position there, and hopefully they're successful in a guy like Kendrick Green, who really technically has more experience than a guy like Hardings when he became a Steeler.
Or Dawson, because Dawson never played any center at Kentucky. And so, again, doesn't mean a whole lot. Not saying that Green seems the next Dawson or Hardings, but if he can be either of those guys, then the Steelers have made a great pick.
One other thing I'm working on right now, starting up a 90 and 30 series where we're just take a loose look at all 90 guys on the 90 players on the 90-man roster. Obviously, right now, how many of those will change before I get it? Will it end up being 92 and 30 or what? It's one of those things that you don't know how to title this thing, because 90 might be a different 90, but hopefully as I knock these guys off in previewing the 90-man roster, hopefully those guys will stay, and hopefully if there's any changes, I can get to those before previewing the guys that might be out the door there. But I'm doing this alphabetically. Yesterday I did DeMarcus Acey, Marcus Allen, and Tyson Alu. And really, you look at a guy like DeMarcus Acey. I mean, former undrafted free agent out of where Missouri, got some length and some weight to him. I think best kind of fitted to be an outside corner there. Did not stick with the 49ers in 2020, but did bounce around, I think, on a couple of practice squads. I think, Seattle and Washington, was it? I think.
I'm not 100% sure.
Last season. A kid that, probably doesn't have, you never say never, right? Stranger things have happened, but you would think guy that's really, really a long shot to make the 90-man roster. But, is this a guy that could do enough during, may have done enough during the offseason program to date and can carry that on during training camp that somehow winds up with him getting a practice squad spot? So that might be one of those guys there. Obviously, Marcus Allen made the jump from safety to inside linebacker last season. When you look at that, inside linebacker depth chart right now, especially on the heels of the team drafting Buddy Johnson, and you hope and pray that Ulysses Gilbert is back and can beat the odds after a couple injuries with his back there. Marcus Allen's going to have a tough time, I think, this summer, Alex. I think you probably agree. He's far from considered a 53-man roster lock at this point. Could it be a scenario maybe where Marcus Allen, at least sticks on the practice squad?
I suppose that's possible, especially if they continue to expand practice squad eligibility and roster spots. But, I just wonder, I think he can carve out a role on special teams or even potentially in dime, because we still don't know who the dime defender is going to be. And if hypothetically Antoine Brooks-Jr. is going to play in the slot, you could still have Pierre come in dime, but you could have someone like Marcus Allen maybe work in there as well. So I think there's a lot of competition there. I think it'll be good just for the whole group. A lot of young guys with UG3 and Buddy Johnson and Allen himself, and even Spillane, still relatively new to the Steelers and new to his role, will hopefully just bring out the best in everybody.
What would you put on his percentage chance right now of maybe assuming no injuries, yada yada, all the qualifiers? What raw percentage would you give him on making the 53? Was he on your roster prediction?
Mm-hmm. I believe he was. Yes. Was he on yours? I thought he was on yours.
I don't remember.
I want to say he was. I would say, again, arbitrarily 65%. I think he's inside looking out right now. Not that he's a lock, he's not, but I think he's got a good chance to make it.
Let me look back at 53-man roster prediction.
Yeah, you have him on there.
Yeah, I have him on there. So I don't know. What percentage did you give him?
65.
I'll take.
But you would cut Vince Williams on your predictions.
Right. But I think the big question, and also too, I have Miles Killebrew in that group, and I don't know if it really matters if you call Killebrew a linebacker or a safety just yet. A special teams demon is what he is there. I think a lot of it depends on what Ulysses Gilbert III has to say about this, and what ultimately happens with Vince Williams. Obviously, if you're going to end up keeping a guy like Vince Williams or Ulysses Gilbert, that's going to make, in my opinion, Marcus Allen's roster path a lot tougher.
Yeah, if UG3 and Vince makes it, then Allen might get the squeeze there. But we'll see what happens in camp.
And then the third one on that list, obviously, Tyson Alualu, a guy that I slam dunk nearly guaranteed would be back as a free agent earlier in the offseason, and then it didn't look like he wasn't. I was incredibly disappointed with that. I know you were as well, too. Ended up having to change of heart because of the whole being down with COVID and all like that, and I really am glad he did. And what does that mean for 2021? I think I think the hope is, look, he obviously battled that knee, and what else? Kind of a high ankle sprain, I think, later on last season there that might have impacted his play here. A guy that goes without saying, the last couple seasons, seems like he's found that fountain of youth somehow. I think best case scenario is he picks up kind of where he left off last season, the good portion of his play, and hopefully, and a guy that really nobody's really asked anybody about, Carlos Davis, second. That guy kind of got lost in the shuffle, right? After 60 decent snaps against the Dallas Cowboys. I think the hope beyond hope is maybe you get some more progression out of a guy like Carlos Davis in his second year, and maybe as the season goes on, he helps kind of alleviate maybe some of the snap count that Tyson Alu's asked to play there. But it goes without saying that Tyson Alu should be expected to be an integral part of the Steelers defense in 2021, and hopefully he can play at the same level that really he's played at brutalizing some of these centers around and guards too around the league. A guy that gives you a little bit of position flexibility on top of it there. So those are the three that I made through so far. I have another set of the three alphabetically today, and hopefully if time allows it, I'll be on schedule and I can get all 90 done in a 30-day time period here.
Who are the next three? Not to pressure on the alphabet too much, but do you know who the next three are?
I would believe that would be Abdullah Anderson, a guy that interesting guy, was brought along as was he untendered? I forget if he was or what his situation played out with the last team he was with there, but a guy that I think you could look at as a Chris Wormley-like player, if you will. Kalen Ballage is on the list. Obviously, a guy I think that you at least, I don't know if I put it, did I put him on my 53-man roster or not? It's been so long now.
I can check. I got it still pulled up here. Let's see. Yes, you did as the fourth running back.
All right, a guy that's going to be battling for a backup roster spot, and we talked about this last guy. He'll be included on this list too, returning back from the knee injury in 2021. Tackle Zach Banner. So it should be a fun three to break down as far as today's installment of 90 and 30.
Yep, looking forward to that. All right, Dave, let's get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, let me pull up the machine here and see what we have here. Pastor Joe Green writes in, just a what if David DeCastro were to retire this summer, what would be the impact on the salary cap in 2021 and beyond? Moreover, how would this affect our offensive line this year and beyond? Why don't you take the this year and beyond as far as how would it impact the offensive line, and I'll answer the financial aspect of it.
Yeah, I mean, the question becomes who's your starting right guard for week 1 against Buffalo? I don't know who that would be. Maybe Coward at this point right now, maybe BJ Finney. But would have a big impact this year just in terms of another change, another big question mark, and trying to adjust on the fly. And then in the future, I mean, it would obviously dictate that you probably draft somebody earlier, sooner than later, probably a day 1 or day 2 pick in next year's draft to address that. But yeah, that would be another change to the line and another question that has to be asked and answered that you don't want to deal with at this point in your season.
And look, I mean, he's in the last year of his contract, so there's no guarantee that he's going to be part of 2022 anyway as we sit here right now, assuming he plays this year. So I think looking ahead to 2022, at least where we sit right now, you have to think a guard might be up in that mix, right? And first, obviously we're a long way out. A lot of things can change and yada yada. But I mean, you could most definitely be in the market for a guard in the early rounds of the draft next year, right?
Yep, absolutely.
All right, as far as the financial impact, David DeCastro is scheduled to earn $8.75 million in 2021. As far as I can tell, none of that's guaranteed there. So if David DeCastro were to hang his hat up there and say, that's it, I'm not playing, the Steelers, and if he did that, obviously, before the first week of the season, there would be an $8.75 million in cash and cap savings for the Steelers in 2021. And oh boy, could you that's quite a bit of savings there. Depending on how early, if such a thing did happen, it would potentially maybe prevent you from doing restructures on a guy like Tuitt and Chris Boswell, right? With a little left over on top of it there, could allow you maybe to put a little bit more money with T.J. Watt's contract in a base salary as opposed to a signing bonus. I mean, the cash flow is still going to be about the same with Watt. I mean, it's not going to change what Watt's deal, what Boy, say that 3 times. What Watt's deal looks like from a cash flow perspective and a new money aspect of it, but it might change how you structure it, as far as a cap hit goes in 2021. So there could be a little bit of an impact on that as well too. But $8.75 million would be a considerable saving salary cap wise should he decide not to continue playing.
Yeah, but again, no real indications that's happening aside from just the aimless Twitter speculation that happens here in late June.
Let's see if I got something else in here. You've been doing a lot of past previous fullback work on the Steelers, or watching some tape on that just recently. From Jay writes in, which bus driver was your favorite and which one was the best? Tim Lester, John Whitman, or Dan Kreider? He says he'll take Kreider and Lester respectively. How would you like to weigh in on that?
I mean, I remember more of the 2000 Steelers than some of the mid to later 90s, and so I'm more of the Kreider fan myself. And I did a video on him and his story, and it's really cool. And it's funny, the 2000 draft class of Colbert, his first one, was a really good class overall. But the Rookie of the Year for Pittsburgh that year, the winner of the Joe Green Award, was Dan Kreider, the undrafted free agent, and it came up like halfway through the year. And so I've always loved Dan Kreider, big 35, following or leading the way for number 36. So I'll go Dan Kreider.
All right. Hard to argue with that reasoning there. Joshua Dicker writes in, hi, Dave and Alex. My question to you guys is, what exactly makes a player good at one position but not good at another position? For example, what makes a wide receiver better in the slot while another wide receiver is better on the outside? Another example would be, what would make a player better at guard versus tackle and vice versa, and what makes them better on one side or the other? That's a multi-layered question there.
Yeah. I mean, there can be a variety of reasons, just your overall skill set and comfort level. If your skill set is someone that's maybe twitchier and, can run more crisp routes, maybe you'll be a better fit in the slot. Not that you have to be in this day and age, because there are bigger slot receivers like Juju. But if you're more of an outside guy that can, win physically and contest, then maybe that's a better skill set for you. Part of it's just kind of where your comfort level is at and where you played in your career. Same with guard and tackle. Just sometimes it's about just, power and strength and athleticism. And a lot of it comes down to size as well. If you're a 6'5", 320-pound tackle or offensive lineman with 34-inch arms, you're probably going to get to play tackle because you don't have too many guys that have that build that are kind of the requirements to play the position. The arm length you don't have to have, super long arms to play tackle well. But usually you kind of get the nod there and kind of get the opportunity there. And if you're a smaller guy or a shorter guy, then you're probably going to get kicked inside. So a lot of it's about just size and comfort and team need and those kind of things. I think a lot of it just kind of comes from where you started playing growing up and where you played in college and where you're kind of comfortable and gotten your experience at.
And as far as the sides go, especially when it comes to offensive linemen, I remember way back when Flozo Adams came over to the Steelers, he talked about muscle memory and all those years of playing on the left side and having to kind of really relearn the aspect of that. So, comfortability really plays, and familiarity really plays a big part of that. And that, maybe that's a little bit of a reason to be a little bit more excited about Chukwuma Okorafor, going back to his more natural position that he played at Western Michigan, was on the left side there. So, and some guys do better inside, or some tackles can make a move maybe to the inside and play at guard, but some just don't play well in confined spaces, if you will, inside a phone booth, if you will, on it. So I don't think you can make a broad sweeping description or discussion about it. I think it obviously goes back to, and I think you just said, what skill set, what does your skill set dictate, and measurables and all like that dictate that you do, and especially in certain schemed offenses.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to football intelligence and just overall smarts. And to me, overall, the philosophy is the closer you are to the inside, to the line, to the center, if you're a slot receiver or you're a slot corner or guard versus a tackle, the faster the game is, the quicker you have to be, the less time you have to read and react to things, and the more information you generally have to process. So the more you move inside, I think the smarter you have to be generally to play the position well.
Chad Burns writes in, "Hi, David Alex. What do you think the best cornerback? Who do you think are the best cornerbacks and edge rushers left on the free agent market in terms of skill set? There are a lot of older name veterans. Just curious who you think has the most left in the tank of the unsigned free agents at these positions." I have not really looked at the cornerback position, to be honest with you, just because I will be surprised if. I mean, I could see it maybe being a former undrafted free agent, a guy that's yet to play any snaps or something if injuries were to hit or something like that. I really haven't looked at the experienced best. I know Richard Sherman's out there and those kind of guys there, but the edge rusher, I think Tom Meade did a great job of building kind of a list of guys that not necessarily free agents, but guys on other teams that might become free agents. As far as the raw free agent list of edge rushers go, man, I mean, really with cornerbacks too, there's not a lot out there that really gets you excited, I don't think.
Yeah, it's thin. I mean, there's Justin Houston. I think Ingram, I believe, is still out there. I think Trent Murphy's been one of the more logical and more economical option for the Steelers. But I think a lot of the extra roster additions are going to come either with an August trade or cut downs or waiver claims, something like that.
Barring injury with a starter, I wouldn't expect it to be a decorated or 30 or over guy. It doesn't fit what the Steelers normally do. Besides, the Steelers like all their backup linebackers, if they don't start or don't play high volume of snaps on defense, they like those guys to be special teamers. That's why I think a guy like Houston, Ingram would be fantastic, right? But I mean, you would think he's going to find a job for more than the minimum and potentially a starting role, whether it be injury or what have you, with some team around the league. So, to be honest with you, Chad, just not, we're looking more at the guys that maybe the Steelers, younger guys that have that really are still under contracts with other teams right now, as being the highest probability, I would think, when it comes to maybe guys the Steelers will add specifically at the edge rusher position.
Yeah, we'll keep an eye on it. As you say, history says they are not done adding to the roster yet.
Let me see if I can get one more here real quick, if there is one in here. No, I think we got most of them here, Alex. Tommy Gunn. Wasn't Tommy Maddox a good from George O'Daugherty? Tommy Maddox, a good example of a first-round draft pick that burned out, who eventually made an impact with the Steelers. In fact, I think he won a Super Bowl.
I mean, that is an example, sure. But man, that is a heck of a route if you're expecting, a duplication of that. I think Haskins has to start selling insurance before he can take the Maddox route.
Yeah, I had to go the XFL route and all like that. And look, I mean, that was it was amazing what he was able to accomplish, right? After the fact there. But if the elbow injury if things didn't go the way they went in 2004 with him. Would the 2004 Steelers bid the 2004 Steelers? Probably not, right?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, by the way, in Cowher's book, he says that Maddox was very upset when this team drafted Ben. He was very upset about that.
I mean,
it's understandable.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly understandable there. I mean, he had just gotten, even though it wasn't much, didn't he just get a new contract? I think I've written about that before, how he had just gotten a new small extension, and obviously Batch was on the roster at the time. It's just weird how you never know how things are going to play out, and injuries certainly dictate. And I've said it several times. I think Colbert said it. I think even Cowher said it even in his book, right? That or in one of the interviews that he's done recently, that the original plan was for Ben to sit his rookie season and be the number 3 and. As things ultimately played out, Maddox had the elbow injury early in the season, and Charlie Batch, I think they thought that knee injury at first was minor, that it ended up needing attention, and he ended up going on IR, and there you are. Ben Roethlisberger was the quarterback, and a magical 2004 season that was. But all right, that's got all the questions, I think, out of the inbox right now. Apologize, we did not have John Eisenberg on this podcast like we thought. Maybe he already had some stuff scheduled for today, but we've got plenty of offseason left. So hopefully next Tuesday we're going to try to have him on the show, and I think we're going to try to have Dr. Mel as part of the Friday show, right, Alex?
Yeah, we should have her for the Friday show, so super excited to get to talk with Dr. Mel.
All right, so in the meantime, you can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. Thanks for all the support and the questions and all. And man, the live stream turnout Monday night was fantastic. And we just can't thank you enough for supporting everything that we do. So until... let's see, you can, if you want to make a donation, go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button up right navigational bar. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, please go to SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button up right navigational bar. For $25, you can have a calendar version of an ad-free subscription to SteelersDepot.com. So until Friday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave.